I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and while there are a lot of crazy things in the woods, there's also some crazy things in the water. I know that because I have seen it firsthand. I have a firsthand account of a giant catfish. I was fishing at Watts Bar Dam. I was really young. It was sometime in the winter because I remember my dad had like one of them little propane lanterns there. This was before cell phones or like regular LED flashlights, so we had a propane lantern, and I was in a wetsuit that was way too big for me, and we were fishing on the bank very close, and it's all rocks right by the water, and there was like a sidewalk, so we were on the sidewalk. I think I was laying on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden we heard this ruckus in the water, and we looked down. My dad's fishing. I'm not fishing, obviously. I'm very young. And I look down, and there is this catfish swimming in the water, y'all. This thing, to me, at that age, looked bigger than a school bus. In reality, it had to have been bigger than a car. I don't think it was as big as a school bus, but bigger than a car. That's a catfish that probably weighs 2,000, 3,000 pounds. Y'all, at these dams in Tennessee, they have these huge, they're called turbines, however y'all want to say it. It's these massive fans that spin like a propeller on a cruise ship. They have those. I don't know what the purpose is, but they're at the bottom of the dam, and it just cuts up all this food, and these massive fish just lay at the bottom of the dam, and they gobble up all this food because there's no predators for them. I don't think there's any lifespan, and they just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow because catfish are bottom feeders. So if you're there on the bottom with an endless buffet, of course you're going to get very large, and you're going to grow it to the size of a school bus in a kid's mind. And in reality, it was definitely the size of a car, maybe an SUV. It was massive. And I remember also one other time when we were fishing on the boat with my dad, he caught a catfish, and it was, pulling the boat around in the water. Massive catfish in this river. It was pulling the boat, and then right before the line snapped, its tail came out of the water, and it looked like a whale tail. It was absolutely massive. So if you have ever thought about getting in the water in the Appalachian Mountains and any of those deep rivers, just don't do it. Don't do it. There are massive fish in there that can literally swallow you whole.
I got an email from a girl who said that when she was younger, she went to this camp and she saw a nun in the forest and people in the sky. This is one of the scariest stories I've gotten in a very long time. So we're going to call her Sadie for the story. So when Sadie was in 5th grade, her 5th grade class went on a field trip to a camp somewhere in Indiana. The campsite was called Rancho Formosa. Sadie said that as soon as her teacher told her about this, she just got a really bad feeling about it, and she had no idea why, but she was almost scared to go. But her mother made her go anyway because she was struggling with some things at the time, and she thought that it would be good for her. It was 3 nights. They all get into the bus and they roll into the camp. She said that as soon as they rolled into the camp, like the very second they rolled into the camp, she threw up all over her friend that was sitting in front of her, and she got an immediate migraine. She tells her teacher about this, and her teacher is just like, it's probably because this is a new environment. You didn't really want to come anyways. You're probably just stressed out. And plus, she is on the spectrum, she said. And so her teacher said that that could have been it too. And her friend who she threw up on, Lucy, also said this could be because of that. She also did say that she is high functioning and that people don't really understand how hard it can be for high functioning autistic people. Well, they get to the cabin. It's the girl's cabin, and her best friend is with her, and they put all their stuff down and they sit on the bed, and her best friend starts reading to her. And she said that they would often do this. She would read to her and she would just kind of lay down next to her and fall asleep. Now, she said because she is autistic that she is insanely ticklish. So she's laying there asleep next to her best friend who is still reading when suddenly she wakes up to someone tickling her foot or like brushing against her foot. She wakes up smiling because she thinks that it's her friend because they play around with each other and like play fight all the time. She looks over and her friend is still right next to her reading. So she looks at her friend and she's like, did you just tickle me? And her friend's like, no. And she looks around the room and there's no one else in the room. So it could have meant anybody else. So she's thinking in her head, okay, I'm just anxious. That's all this is. I didn't really feel that. Well, after this, they have to go to this luncheon, right? So they go to the luncheon and they're walking towards the luncheon, and she starts noticing that there are shadows, like from the corner of her eye, she keeps seeing shadows. And again, she is like, I am just anxious. This is nothing. So they go to the luncheon, they eat, and after the luncheon, everybody is going out to the woods to play. So they're all playing out into the woods when she notices there are statues everywhere. It was like a Christian place, and so there were Christian statues all over the place. And she keeps seeing them move, and this is really freaking her out. So she keeps asking her best friend, are you seeing this? Like, do you see them moving, or am I literally just losing my mind right now? And her best friend at this point is actually like, I thought I saw that too. But at this point, Sadie is like, you know what? We should just ignore this, because it's either our mind's playing tricks on us, or we're just anxious, or something is happening and we need to ignore it. So they decide to ignore it. A little while passes by and sunset comes. It's about 6 p.m. at this point, and she's playing with her friend when she looks over at Lucy, and Lucy has this expression on her face like she is about to jump out of her skin, and she's looking up at the sky. She said at this point she got this horrible feeling in her stomach, and she refused to look at the sky. She just kept looking at Lucy, and she was like, Lucy, what are you doing? What's wrong? And Lucy just blurted out, there's people in the sky. At this point, Sadie is just like, okay, calm down. Like, we just ignore what you're seeing. Sadie's still not looking at the sky, and she just grabs Lucy's arm and she walks away with her. And they go to this campsite, like where there's a campfire. So they get to this campfire, and Sadie is just admiring the smoke. She said that she always felt it was soothing to look at smoke and fire just like kind of coming up, and I can see that too. So she's looking at this smoke, and she realizes something. The smoke is kind of forming silhouettes. They're not, she said that they weren't completely like solid. They were just like outlined of silhouettes. So at this point, Sadie is just like, there's no way that this is happening. I can't, like, my mind is playing tricks on me. I have to ignore this, because I feel like the more I'm seeing things, the more it's just happening. And so she's trying to ignore it and put it in the back of her head, but deep down she knows that what she's seeing is real. Well, unfortunately, after this, the teachers make the children go on a night hike. Why they would do that, I don't know. As they're going on this night hike, she notices that there's this little boy in the hike, and he starts crying. And so she walks over to him. She said that he was about 7 years old, and she's like, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? And he tells her that there's a nun watching him, and that he keeps seeing a nun everywhere. And this little boy is terrified. And she's trying to calm him down, telling him that there's no nuns, that everything's okay, and that he can walk with them. Now, I want to remind you guys that this is a Christian camp, right? So how does this 7-year-old boy have the wherewithal to kind of put those two things together? I know that nuns are Catholic, but still, it's similar because it all has to do with religion. So she's walking with this little boy, she's walking with Lucy, and she turns, she looks, and she cannot believe what she sees. She sees a nun in the forest staring at her, a very long, crooked neck, and this huge, nasty smile on her face, and she's just waving. She said as soon as she saw this, she turned around and ran as fast as she could and ran straight into a tree. She said at this point she did not even care that she ran into the tree. She was so terrified that she didn't even know what to do with herself. She said at this point they left. They started walking back. And she said as she's walking back, she sees this nun everywhere. The nun is just appearing in different places, just standing there, smiling, waving at her, and she's trying as hard as she can not to look at this nun. She said that they finally get to the cabin, and she starts to feel somewhat safe, and her and Lucy are just absolutely terrified, and it's time to go to sleep at this point. So they decide that they are going to sleep together, because there's no way they're sleeping alone. Now, she said that she falls asleep, and around 4 o'clock in the morning she wakes up and she feels something on her. When she described this, I didn't really understand what she was saying. She said something like her grandmother used to do something that's called a raspberry on, like, by touching her to help her if she was having nightmares, and she felt that. She felt like her grandmother was touching her and doing that movement. This part is maybe the worst part. So again, she wakes up smiling because she thinks that it's Lucy again, but she looks to the side of her and Lucy is still sleeping next to her. So she looks at the foot of her bed, and what she saw not only confused her, but terrified her. She said that she saw a little girl that looked like her grandmother, except for her eyes were too low on her face for a normal human being. Her mouth was gaped open so far it looked unnatural. She said she heard this little girl that looked like her grandmother then say, "You are not safe here." And then she just disappears. She ended the story by saying, that was the first night out of 3. If you would like to hear the rest, I can email them to you. Yes, I would like to hear the rest. Would you guys like to hear the rest? Because, oh my God. First of all, what did the people in the sky look like? I must know that. Second of all, what is going on with the little girl grandma? That is so creepy. There was so many details in this story, like very specific details that freaked me out. The grandma probably was the worst for me. The nun was the second worst. I don't know why the nun wasn't first. That one was terrifying too. I don't know how is that happening at a Christian camp? I think it's so crazy when I hear stories about like haunted churches or Christian camps or like anything that has to do that is godly, and you're in an area that is supposed to be godly, but there are evil things there. I guess it kind of makes sense. What do you guys think about that?
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this cousin of mine who had schizophrenia and was mistaken for somebody who had demons and was possessed. We only found out that she had schizophrenia after she had unalived herself. So y'all, growing up with this cousin, she used to tell me that she hears voices, right? And I didn't understand what she meant. She would tell me like, yo, you know, sometimes I hear voices and they tell me to do bad things. And I'll be like, girl, what? She'd be like, yeah. Sometimes we would be playing in the villages, and you know, in the villages there's animals, goats, sheep, cows, chickens, all that goodness. So I would ask her like, what do these voices tell you to do? She'd be like, they tell me to unalive the animals, and I can't do that because I'm too scared. And at the same time, she knows that's wrong. And that was the initial stages of all of this, right? Chilled. This one day, I didn't know that this whole thing had progressed. This one day, I went to go visit her, y'all, because there was a ceremony at her uncle's place, and we decided to sleep over at her place. And obviously, because this was my twin, we decided to sleep in the same room, right? Sharp. It came to nighttime, we're sleeping, and as I'm sleeping, guys, I have this dream. It was not a dream, it was actually reality, but it felt like a dream at first, you know, because I'm hearing these sounds, like these loud sounds where it's thumping and thudding, and I'm protecting myself and I don't know what's happening. Eventually I wake up and I find my cousin on top of me and she's beating me up, she's punching me, y'all, and it was painful because she was punching me on my chest, on my face, and there were times, and I found myself like this. I found myself covering my face because I'm like, wait, what the hell? So as soon as I realized my cousin is beating me up, I tried to wake her up, and I realized she's not waking up, and I push her off me. I get off, I roll off the bed, and I start screaming. I'm running around the room, guys. I get to the door now. I'm trying to open the door to go out and call people because this girl is beating me up, right? As I try to open the door, she pulls me, guys, and she goes in. At this point I start screaming. She's on top of me, she's beating me up. And I'm screaming. Her parents wake up and her mom opens the door. Her mom pulls her off me and she tells me to go to the living room. I get to the living room and I'm asking myself what's going on. I am in pain. My nose is bleeding. I have a bruise here because she was punching me. Her mom decides we'll talk about it in the morning. I should go sleep with the other sister, and then they will sleep. She will sleep with her, right? Sharp. So I couldn't sleep anymore because I'm thinking this family is a bunch of weirdos. What if the sister's like that as well? So we're sitting up, whatever, and the sister's like, you must be scared. And I'm like, yeah, aren't you scared? She's like, she's scared as well. She sleeps and she locks her door. Yo, when we walked inside her room, she literally locked the door. She's like, this person sometimes wakes up and throws shoes at her, like. Sometimes she says the sister with the illness, she sometimes sleeps with a knife. And there was a time where they found her with a knife and she was sleeping with a knife. When they asked her what that knife was doing, she told them she doesn't know, she doesn't remember. And so the sister, right, is like, I lock my door. I don't even play like that because there was a time where she chased her around the house with a knife again. We wake up in the morning, y'all. I was so mad at this girl. I refused to speak to her because, first of all, look at my face. Look at me. How can you beat me up, right? I didn't know, y'all. I didn't know at this time. So she tells her mom that she had a dream where she was fighting with somebody, like she was beating somebody up. And her mom tells her, like, it actually was not you. It was not a dream. You were actually fighting with your cousin. And she came to me and she looked at me and I looked at her so mad. She was like, Kazi, are you mad at me? I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Whatever. I'm like, you know what? Whatever. We go to the ceremonial and her uncle this is her uncle from her dad's side, right? No, her mom's side, because the dad was related to us. So we get to the ceremonial and they are playing drums. It was a traditional healer's ceremony. The uncle was a traditional healer. And so they were playing drums and I think it started getting too loud for her and she started screaming, y'all. She went crazy. She started screaming and she was pulling these drums apart. She was throwing them and she was just going crazy. She was screaming, y'all. She was angry. Nobody could calm her down. They eventually tell us to take her so that we can take a walk, like remove her from this environment, y'all, because I don't know, maybe they needed to continue with whatever they were doing. I don't know. So as we're walking down the road, she's feeling better, and we're sitting at the corner. I asked this girl, what is going on with you? Like, are you okay? What's happening? She's like, she hears voices. And every single time she tells her mom refuses to listen to her. Her mom tells her that it's demonic. Her mom takes her to doctors. And she tells me that she's Googled this and there are people that feel the same way, but she just doesn't know how to express this to her mom because her mom refuses to listen. And whatever her mom says goes, because when she tells her dad, the dad tells the mom tells her, no, we'll go to church, we'll pray about it. They've taken her to traditional healers, and those traditional healers will say things like, yeah, it's because somebody's trying to make her go crazy. Mind you, this girl has been like this since she was young. So she's like, she hears voices in her head. Sometimes she sees things. Sometimes she fights with people, not because she's fighting with you, but because she's seeing you as a monster and she's trying to basically kill that monster. And people do not understand. Her family refuses to understand. They take her as a crazy person and they keep taking her to pastors and traditional healers so that she can get better, but nothing is happening. So y'all, this one time we were at a family gathering. It's all of us, and you know how village life is. There is cows, there's chickens, like I said, there's all the chutas, right? No problem, we are all chilling, we're all having fun, we're eating and stuff like that. And one of the children, like the little babies, I think the baby was like 7, she's like, hey, cousin over here is killing the chickens. Everybody's like, what? Her mom gets up. I get up because I want to see. Guys, this girl was inside that chicken coop and she was just taking these chickens and pulling them apart. She held the head, she held the body, and she was just throwing, and then she threw it. Next, she gets another one. It was horrific, y'all. It was horrific. They had to get her out of that, and when they asked her what was going on, she said that the chickens were mocking her. They were calling her names, and she decided that she needs to them. So the following day, Shane, they decided to take her to the doctor, and the doctor took her for a physical exam, and they told the mom to bring this girl back so that she can go to a psychologist and they can find out what's wrong with her. Did the mom do that? No. Did the mom give this girl her medication? No. What did she do? She went to a pastor. This pastor was like, no, God is going to heal you. You don't need to take those meds. Oh, she got worse and worse as she grew up, y'all. There was this time we were celebrating her 18th birthday, and I remember she used to, she pulled me aside and she was like, do you ever get thoughts to kill you, to kill somebody, to kill a person? And I was like, girl, no. She's like, this person that I always tell you that I see, this person that talks to me told me I need to unalive my sister, and I don't know what to do because I'm scared and I don't want to do it. She's like, every single time she sleeps, this person tells her to do it, and sometimes she gets the urge to actually do it. She says that there was also a time where she tore her sister's door, and now her sister sleeps in the same room with her parents because they don't trust the girl. There is a bell inside the parents' room because they think that the child, they think that my cousin, right, is a threat to them. Instead of taking this girl to the doctor, they see her as a threat. They keep on taking her to this pastor that I think was eating their money, and the mom just refused to change ways. When she left the pastor, she goes to traditional healers. From traditional healer to pastor, from pastor to, she never wanted to take this girl back to the doctor, and I don't know what was her problem. I really don't. And then, unfortunately, this one day, she decided not to go to school. She stayed home. And they got back from work, they got back from school, they found her, and she had unalived herself with a rope. You know exactly how she did it. It was honestly devastating, y'all. It was very much devastating. And that is when we found out that baby girl had schizophrenia, and the mom knew the entire time, but she refused to give this girl her meds because she did not believe that her child was crazy. Apparently, she did go to the doctor. She did go back to the doctor. She did go see a psychologist. The mom knew what was wrong with the child. She never gave her medication, and apparently, they used to give her medication and she would be better, but the mom refused to believe her child was crazy. And it's not even, she viewed it as her child is crazy, but that's not what it is, and y'all, she unalived herself, and she left a note, and the note read that because she could not unalive her sister, she decided to unalive herself. She couldn't bear the thoughts, she couldn't live with the seeing things, she could not. Every single time she's sitting somewhere with people, she can't focus because she sees things. The reason why at that particular traditional ceremony she lost her mind was because these things were so loud. They felt like they were hitting her in her head and she lost her mind. The reason why she obviously pulled these things is because people who have a mental illness, sometimes, guys, they're very sensitive to noise. And once something is very loud, they either start to scream or they lose control. And so, yeah, that's what happened.
Let's read another true and scary story. I spoke with a woman after she died in a car crash miles away. I've been in law enforcement for over 16 years here in Texas, and I've seen more than my fair share of tragic, creepy, and downright unexplainable things on the job. From murder scenes to suicides to fatality accidents, sometimes a place just feels different. I've posted here before about a burglary in progress call I responded to, but here's another encounter that still sticks with me. I may have shared it before, but I figured it's worth repeating for everyone. There was one call I went to, a death notification, that really freaked me out. I had to contact some family members of a deceased woman that was involved in a fatal car accident a few miles away from her home. When I arrived, I met a woman near the roadway just inside the property gate. She said she heard me coming from miles away. I asked her if she lived at the residence, which she confirmed she did. After asking her to speak with me at the house, she agreed, but she said she needed to walk as the house was about 75 yards from the road. After making it to the house, I approached the front door on a small wooden porch and began scanning the driveway for the woman. It was about 1 a.m. and completely dark. While looking for the woman, the front door opened and a younger woman appeared. She was concerned about my presence and asked if everything was okay. I asked if I could speak with her and any other adults inside, and she welcomed me in. I told her I would wait for the woman I met near the gate, and she told me nobody else should be home. I then freaked out and began searching the property. Nothing. After entering the residence, I told her and her husband the news about Susan, which ended up being her mother. She said her mother moved in a few months back after her father had passed and she wasn't handling it well. While she and her husband were comforting one another, I began looking at photos on the wall. There was this picture of a mid-aged woman that stuck out to me. She was a younger version of the woman I spoke with near the gate. While looking at the picture, the daughter confirmed that was her mother, the woman that passed in the wreck. I spoke with the ghost of the individual that died in the crash just before telling her family what happened. This experience and many others prompted me to share stories like these from the job. If you're interested, I've got a video about this and similar stories from fellow officers on my YouTube channel, Policing the Shadows. Have any of you experienced something similar that just can't be explained? I feel like the story is both creepy and also very sad because I wonder whether or not Susan, the mother who died, saw the police officer and knew he was going to speak with her family and wanted almost to accompany him. This also reminds me of experiences I've heard from nurses and doctors seeing their patients who have passed on physically in our world, which is super crazy to think about. As always, if you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
I got a really good cryptid story right out of the Appalachian Mountain. So this guy says that even though the Appalachian Mountains have a lot of really weird things going on there, it's still his home. His family has been there for generations and everybody has their fair share of encounters and stories. So one night when he was about 13 years old, his mini poodle mix Lola woke him up because she needed to use the bathroom. He really didn't want to get out of bed. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, but of course he had to. So when he gets outside, he said he noticed that it was incredibly foggy out, like way foggier than it would be normally around that time of year. And he said he also noticed that it was freezing cold, so much so that he was surprised that it would be able to be as foggy as it was for how cold that it was. He said he could barely see 10 feet in front of him. So Lola runs out to do her business and he's flipping through his phone when all of a sudden he got this really overwhelming feeling that someone or something was right behind him. He said every hair on the back of his neck stood up. He slowly turned around and what he saw was absolutely terrifying. He said about 5 feet in front of him was a huge pitch black dog-like creature with a long cat-like tail that curled at the end. Its body was so long that it was half the length of the Jeep Cherokee it was standing nearby. Its head looked to be too small for its body, and he said its eyes were pure white. And then he said its legs were the worst part. They were impossibly long and bent in ways that any living creature should not be able to walk on. He said it was crouched down, belly to the ground, looking like it was in a position to pounce, kind of like a panther would be. He did the only thing his body would allow him to do, and he let out the loudest scream he has ever screamed. He said it looked up at him with those ungodly white eyes, and it kind of rose up on all fours, and now its ears were about chest height to him. It looked at him, looked over at the dog, looked back up at him, and then turned around and walked away, thank God. When it walked away, it walked with such a smooth stride that he didn't understand how it was possible because of how bent out of shape its legs looked. And then he described the smell. He said there was such a heavy scent in the air of like a skunk. And he said it wasn't just how strong the smell was. It was so thick it almost had weight to it. The dog didn't even seem like it fazed it. And then his mom peeked her head out the door and asked if everything was okay because she said she heard screaming. And he just scooped up the dog and ran inside the house. He told her what happened and they locked up all the doors and windows, and he will never forget that sight. He mentions he has a lot of experience with hunting and being outdoors all the time from living in that area, and he has never even come close to seeing anything like that. That's freaking crazy. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment. And if you're new here, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
Would you know what a ghost looked like if you've seen one? Every day we encounter ghosts. We just don't realize it. Think about today. You probably went to the store, you probably went to work, or you probably rode the subway. How many people did you encounter? And think about it, you walk past these people. You don't know who they are. You don't really think about it. But how many of those people might have been a ghost? Now, we think of ghosts as sort of being these transparent things that you can see through and are terrifying and creepy. But most reports of encounters with ghosts are just regular, normal people that people who encounter them don't even realize that they are ghosts. Now, that's true in these two stories. There's this man who was driving from Dallas to Oklahoma, and he said he happened to be on this back highway. Now, he had just bought this brand new vehicle, and this was his first time taking it on a long road trip. So as he's going down this dark, remote highway that cut through a bunch of cornfields, he said he started to hear his tire making a funny sound. And then all of a sudden he hears an explosion, and his tire had blown. So he pulls his vehicle off to the side of the road, and he gets out, and he starts looking for a spare tire. Well, he soon realizes that he doesn't have a tire jack. But then out of nowhere comes this old 1950s pickup truck, and it had this wooden boxed-in bed. And this man steps out. He's sort of this taller African-American man wearing these jean overalls, and he's got some black boots on. And he said this man walked over to him and said, hey, let me help you out. Looks like you're having some car trouble. So he goes to his truck, and he gets out this very old looking jack. He jacks up the truck, puts the tire on for him. And so this man, he wants to offer this guy some money for helping him. But the guy says, no, I don't want it. I'm not going to accept it. He says, just make sure you do good to someone else. He says, okay, I'll see you later. And he gets in his truck, and he drives away. And at first he thought, that's kind of strange. That guy just came out of nowhere, and it was right as I needed a jack. So he gets in his car, and he drives down the road, and he gets to this nearest town. And he happens to stop into this old diner. And as he's sitting there, he starts talking with the waitress. It tells her about, how this nice man, I don't know if he's from this town, but he helped me, get the tire on my truck. And if you see him again, tell him I said thank you. And the waitress looks at him and said, oh, you see Gus? He said, Gus? Who's Gus? And she said, oh, Gus is the friendly ghost that lives on that highway. He was driving one night, and he was in an accident, and he was this nice old man that liked to help people. And still to this day, people say they encounter him when they're having car trouble or something is going wrong. Now, this next story takes place in Arkansas. There's this woman, she said that she just moved to Little Rock, and she said every day when she would drive home, she would turn onto her street, and on the corner, there was this blue house. She would see this old woman in sort of this checkered nightgown, standing on the edge of her yard, just staring off into the distance. She said she didn't move, she just stood there. And she would drive past her, she would pull into her house, and that woman would still be out there. And sometimes she'd be standing in her yard for hours. She said one day she drove home, and she sees the woman standing out there. But as she pulls in her driveway, she gets out of her vehicle, and she said right as she turned around, there was a woman standing at the edge of her driveway. And she's like, how in the world did she get from the corner of the street to in front of my house that fast? So she turns back into her car, grabs something, and she turns around and she was gone. Well, shortly after this, she talks to one of the neighbors, and she starts asking her, who's the neighbor on the end that, was always outside in the checkered nightgown? And the woman seemed confused. She said, what are you talking about? And then she goes, oh, you mean there used to be this lady, Miss Martin, who lived on the corner house. She passed away 10 years ago. She always would stay up and sit out in front of her house or stand out in front of her house and she wore this checkered nightgown.
Part 2 of the woman that was haunted by her evil Tia. So in 2018, Tia Bianca ended up passing away, which is when the real nightmare began. Months after Tia Bianca passed away, Liz's brother started feeling like there was somebody in the room watching him anytime he would try to sleep. One day he happened to look across the room and saw Tia Bianca standing there staring at him. She even spoke to him and told him to tell one of the other cousins. I guess one of the other cousins was having like a drinking problem, like they were drinking too much. So she told Liz's brother to tell that cousin to stop drinking so much and to stop using her death as an excuse, and went ahead and started like shooting out like instructions and like commands as if she was still like in charge or like had authority over the family. This, of course, completely freaked out Liz's brother, so when he went ahead and told Liz about it, she decided to sage the home. She put a bunch of protection crystals around the house to prevent any sort of negativity to enter their home, and she did like a full cleansing, which really quieted things down for a while. Until they found out that Liz's dad was being scammed by Tia Bianca's kids. After Tia Bianca passed away, even before that, like clockwork, Liz's dad would always send money to that family. Even though he wasn't like really helping out Liz and her brother very much, like his own kids, any extra money he had would go to Tia Bianca's kids. Liz found out that the reason that he was doing this was because brujeria was being done to him. Apparently that side of the family was very heavy on brujeria, and they were doing like this domination thing in order to get him to just blindly send money to them and completely forget about all of his other like responsibilities. A few weeks go by and Liz's brother sees Tia Bianca in his room once again, but this time Tia Bianca is sitting there moving her mouth, but there was no noise coming out of her mouth, and it was almost like she was crying, but like there was no sound coming from her. About a few weeks after that, her daughter, so the one that was scamming Liz's dad, passed away. She just like passed away in her sleep. Now, months after that, Liz's mom is in her bedroom, like getting ready to go to bed, when she hears 3 knocks on her bedroom window. When she looks out the window, she sees Tia Bianca, like her whole face just like up on the glass, like of the window. A few days after that, another family member of theirs also passes away. Now the family believes that the aunt only shows up right before a family member is about to pass away, or that maybe she's behind the reason why all of these family members are just like randomly passing away. She will show up in their dreams. Sometimes she'll pull their legs when they're sleeping, or she'll be standing at the doorway of like their bedroom door, refusing to leave. Like this is all after Tia Bianca passed away. So they're pretty much all freaked out, trying to figure out what to do to get her to go away. I can go ahead and send her some suggestions of my own that I can like help her with, but if you guys have any new suggestions that you want to let her know she's going to be reading the comments, definitely comment down below.
This happened about 15 years ago, when I was around 7 years old. As a kid, I often went out on the land with my grandma. It was our way of helping us reconnect with our traditions. During this particular time, it was just my grandma, my aunt, my older cousin, my younger cousin, and me. One morning, I overheard my aunt talking to my grandma while us kids were still asleep. I was a light sleeper, so I could easily hear what was going on. I heard my aunt telling my grandma that my little cousin, who was around 3 or 4 years old at the time, had heard a woman screaming outside our cabin 3 times, saying, "Help me." My cousin was terrified and jumped onto her mom's bed, shaking and saying, "Mommy, someone is saying help me outside." My aunt ended up hearing it too, but she quietly comforted her and put her back to sleep. I always was a curious kid, so hearing that stayed with me all day. When bedtime came, I couldn't fall asleep because I kept thinking about what I had overheard. I tossed and turned for hours until I noticed it was around 2 a.m. Everyone else was asleep, and I was lying next to my grandma. All of a sudden, I heard a woman's voice yelling from far away, screaming, "Benny!" It was faint at first. The second time she screamed, it sounded closer, and the third time there was a high-pitched scream that sounded like it was right next to my ear. I was terrified. I hid under the covers, shaking nonstop. The next morning, I sat down with my grandma and aunt and told them what I had heard. They said they hadn't heard anything, but I'm sure they were just trying not to scare me. Years later, when I turned 15, I brought it up to my mom. She went on to tell me there used to be a couple who lived next door to our cabin, and they loved to party often. One day, the woman became severely sick while at camp, and she didn't make it to the local clinic in time. The most terrifying part was that her partner's name was Benny. When my mom told me that, it shook me to my core. I truly believed that the woman's spirit was still lingering around our old campsite. After that, I avoided going back to camp, especially after hearing other experiences from my family. Eventually, we left that cabin and settled somewhere else. But every night, when it's time for bed, my mind still goes back to that night.
In 2010, Sam Ballard was a 19-year-old living in Australia. He was a college student and a standout rugby player. His mother described him as being invincible. One night, Sam and his buddies were over a friend's house having what they called a red wine appreciation night, where they sarcastically pretend to be grown-ups by only drinking wine instead of beer. And after hours of drinking and joking around, they were standing in the backyard on the patio when they noticed a small slug crawling across the ground. And at some point, one of the boys yelled out, "Hey, someone should eat that!" But no one was taking him seriously, and everyone just kind of joked about it. But Sam took it as a challenge and said, "You know what? I'll eat the slug." And everyone's like, "No way, you're not going to eat that slug." But them telling him he wasn't going to do it only egged him on, and so he picked that slug up, threw it in his mouth, and he ate it. And the boys howled with laughter. They were so impressed, and for the rest of the night, he was the king. The next morning when Sam got up, he noticed a dull ache in his legs. He attributed the pain to his hangover and expected it to clear by the evening. But by the end of the day, the fog of his hangover had gone away, but the pain in his legs had not. The following day, when he woke up, the pain was not only still there, it had intensified. And so he told his mother about it, and her first concern was that he could be developing multiple sclerosis, something his dad had. Sam was concerned about that too, but he also told her that he had eaten this slug, and he was concerned that, maybe this could be some sort of allergic reaction to that. And his mother said, "You know what, you got nothing to worry about with the slug. Nobody gets sick from things like that." So they went to the doctor, and multiple sclerosis was very quickly ruled out, which was a huge relief to the Ballards. But the doctor said they didn't really have a good reason for why Sam was experiencing this leg pain. Sam brought up the fact that he had eaten this slug, and even though his mom didn't think it was a big deal, he was wondering if maybe this could be an allergic reaction. And the doctor said that off the top of their head, they had no idea if the slug had anything to do with this leg pain. But a couple of days later, the doctor called Sam back and said they'd had a chance to do some research, and they spoke to their colleagues, and it looks like Sam had something called rat lungworm disease. This is an infection most commonly found in rats that's caused by a parasitic worm that can be passed down to snails and slugs if they eat the rat feces that contains the parasite's larva. Based on Sam's symptoms, which now included persistent dizziness and vomiting, the doctor informed him that most likely the slug he consumed at that party was a carrier of the parasite. The doctor informed the Ballards that most people who contract rat lungworm disease do so from eating undercooked or raw snails, and they recover without incident once the parasite dies. But in very rare cases, the parasite can penetrate the intestine, traverse the nervous system, and then burrow itself into the outer lining of the brain, causing patients to suffer from a very rare form of meningitis that can be deadly. Sam and his family were told there wasn't much anybody could do to help treat his symptoms, and so all they could really do was just wait to see how severe his case was going to be. And unfortunately, Sam's was extremely severe. Just a few days after his diagnosis, Sam did develop the rare form of meningitis, and he slipped into a coma for 420 days. When he finally woke up, he was paralyzed, he wasn't able to speak, and he couldn't eat without a feeding tube. He required care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the disease did not affect his mental faculties. He was just as sharp as ever. One of his best friends, Jimmy Galvin, who was there the night Sam ate the slug, said he went into Sam's room after he came out of this coma, and he told Sam how sorry he was that he didn't try to stop him from eating the slug. And although Sam couldn't speak or react in any way, he cried because clearly he had understood what Jimmy had told him. Sam was eventually released from the hospital in a motorized wheelchair 3 years after being admitted. He would only live another 5 years before the infection claimed his life. Sam kept a copy of the Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places He'll Go, close to him over the 8 years following his diagnosis. The book was Dr. Seuss's final salute, offering encouragement to children as they deal with life's inevitable obstacles. Over the years, as he struggled with his severe disabilities, his friends and family would read from this book, willing him to make the best of the challenges he was facing. And then as his friends and family said their final goodbye at his funeral, the book was read one last time. When Conrad Rowland was a little kid, he was always on the go. One time when he was at the grocery store with his mother, he leapt out of the cart and ran away from her, and she found him stuck inside of a freezer. After that incident, she literally made him wear bells on his shoes when they were out in public so she didn't lose track of him. But by the time Conrad was just 4 years old, he had discovered athletics, and instead of putting his energy into running away from his mom, he focused it exclusively on baseball, basketball, soccer, and tennis. And by the time he was 11 years old, he was an exceptional all-around athlete. And at the time, his school announced they were going to have this special guest speaker at an assembly, and it turned out to be the Hall of Fame baseball player Rod Carew. And Conrad was just blown away. He just could not believe he was in the presence of an actual professional athlete, let alone a guy that had achieved the success Rod Carew had. And so after this assembly, when he got home, it was all Conrad could talk about, was just how incredible Mr. Carew was and how he, Conrad, was gonna be a professional athlete just like Mr. Carew. For many kids, this would just be a phase. They'd be really invested in sports, and then their interest would go somewhere else, and they'd kind of forget about it, and it would not be their life calling anymore. But for Conrad, the impression Rod Carew left on him was so profound that he never wavered. He really did dedicate himself to becoming a professional athlete, and he would be successful, albeit in a different sport. He became a professional football player in the NFL. And in 2012, Conrad started nearly every game for the New York Jets at tight end. It was like his professional career was going off without a hitch. But in 2013, he injured his knee, which sidelined him for about 2 years. And even though he diligently rehabbed and got back to full strength, the teams were not really ready to take a flyer on him because they were worried his knee would just give out again. He continued to train extremely hard in hopes of landing another contract, but his playing career was starting to look bleak. During the 2016 offseason, Conrad was back home in California visiting his family. One night, as his mother, Mary, was making dinner, Conrad was sitting at the table filling out his driver's license renewal form. And when he got to the section where it asked him if he wanted to be an organ donor, he stopped and he asked his mother, are you an organ donor? And she would say, yeah, I am. And so Conrad said, okay, then I will be too. And he checked the box. And Mary remembers thinking, gosh, I really hope it never comes to that. A few months later, Conrad was working out in a local gym getting ready for the next season when he developed a sudden and severely painful headache. He tried to keep working out, but he just could not do it. So he stepped aside and he called his mom and he told her that he felt this weird click in his head and then he felt this blinding pain behind his left eye. His mother told him he needed to go to the hospital right away. And so that day, Conrad went over to the UCLA Medical Center where they quickly diagnosed him with a brain aneurysm. A brain aneurysm is the bulging or ballooning of a blood vessel in the brain. If the aneurysm bursts, it's fatal about 50% of the time. And for the people who survive a ruptured aneurysm, most likely they will suffer from significant neurological deficits. After his diagnosis, Conrad remained positive and assured his family he was going to kick this thing's butt. But on December 12th, just 4 days after he was admitted, Conrad's aneurysm burst and he never regained consciousness. Because Conrad was an organ donor, the doctors kept his body on life support and they called the recipients at the top of the donor lists. One of them was a man in his 70s who a year earlier had suffered a massive heart attack and desperately needed a new heart. When he and his wife got the call, they were shaking. They couldn't believe it. His life was about to be saved. They already lived right near Los Angeles, so they hopped in their car and they sped to the UCLA Medical Center, and shortly thereafter, news out of the operating room was the transplant had been a success. The man Conrad's heart had just saved was none other than Baseball Hall of Famer Rod Carew, Conrad's childhood hero that had pushed him to become a professional athlete. At first, the families had no idea, but eventually this incredible link was discovered and immediately the two families bonded. Today, because Conrad's family only lives 12 miles away from Rod Carew and his family, Conrad's mother was given a standing invitation by the Carews to stop by anytime she wanted to listen to her son's heart.
Payson, Arizona always gives me weird vibes. I don't know what it is about that place, but every time I go there, I feel uneasy. Now, it's this beautiful mountain town, but it's also very secluded, and it happens to be home to one of the most famous alien abduction cases. But there was a really creepy story that I heard out of the Payson area. There was this man named John. John said that his grandfather owned this 100-acre ranch outside of Payson. And he said he had hired this Native American man to take care of his sheep. And he lived there on this ranch in a small trailer. Well, one day, John's grandfather goes out to check on this man. And so he drives to the mountains, out to his ranch. And when he arrives to the trailer, he is shocked to see that all the sheep and they are missing their skin. Something had basically taken the fur off, and he immediately thinks that something is wrong. So he jumps out of his truck and he goes to his trailer, and he finds that it's locked. He starts banging on the door, calling for this man. He can't get in. So he goes around to a window, he breaks out the window, and he gets inside his trailer. And there he finds this man huddled in the corner, terrified, shaking, and in very bad shape. He said this man kept saying this one word over and over again, and he couldn't understand what he was saying. It was his language, and he didn't know what it meant. So he tries talking to this guy, but the guy is just in too bad of shape. So he gets him in his truck. He says, I need to get him somewhere and get him some help. He starts leaving the trailer, starts going down this mountainous road, and all of a sudden, he looks out the right side of the window, and he sees something running alongside the truck. He describes it as a deer that's been flipped inside out, and it is running on two legs. And it was keeping pace with his truck, and he's going about 45 miles an hour. And he said this thing kept following him, and he, accelerated up to 60, up to 70, and it was still keeping pace with him. He said that's when this man started saying that same word over and over again that he was saying in the trailer. And he realized he is saying what he thinks this thing is. He's calling it by its name, whatever it is. Finally, this thing runs in front of the truck. His grandfather swerves, goes off the mountain, and they crash. The man who worked for his grandfather, he passed away. And so he was never able to talk to him about what happened. His grandfather managed to live to tell the tale. But shortly after that, his grandfather sold that ranch and would never go back to that place.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
People who work the night shift often have supernatural encounters. Now, there was a story that came out of Arizona. There's this man named Edward. Edward said he got a job right outside of the Navajo reservation at this small gas station. Now, he said his manager, this older Native American man, he told him before he started this job, he said, there's one thing you must know. There is a set of rules that I have when you work night shift here at this gas station. He said the first rule, now this is the most important rule. When it strikes midnight, you must lock the front door and do not unlock it ever until the morning. He said the second rule, if someone comes to that door and they want to come in after midnight, do not let them in. Even if it seems like they need help, even if it seems like someone you know, do not let anybody into the gas station after midnight. And he said, because they aren't really people. He goes, Edward's like, what do you mean? And he said, I can't talk about it, but just make sure you do not let them in. And he said, the third rule is you must keep the lights on all night long. Don't ever let the lights go out. And if the power goes out, you are to turn this lantern on and some of these flashlights, but do not let it get dark in here. And he said, the fourth rule, you must never answer the phone after midnight. He said, even if it continuously rings like someone important is trying to get a hold of you, do not pick up that phone. So Edward was like, okay, at the time he just kind of thought it was ridiculous, but he's like, all right, I'll do it. So he works at this gas station for several months, and he listens to what this man tells him. And he locks the door at night, and he keeps the lights on, and he doesn't let anyone in. Well, this one night, there was a really bad monsoon, and it was raining, and there was lightning and thunder, and it struck midnight on the clock. So he locked the door. At 12:01, he hears a knock at the door. And when he goes to the front door, and he looks out the glass, he sees this woman. She is completely soaked. She's muddy. Her eyes look very wide. She looks in distress and like something is wrong. And she goes, please, please, let me in. You have to let me in. And she's, crying and screaming, banging on this window. And he's like, look, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, I cannot let you in. And she goes, no, please, you don't understand. You have to let me in. And she, banging harder and harder. And he's like, I told you we're closed. Go away. He said, that's when this woman, at the time, you could see her from this light that was outside. It was shining on her. But when she stepped outside of this light, so that's when he noticed her face started to change. She didn't look human anymore. She looked like some kind of monster. And he said she just twisted her head to the side and she took off running. And instantly he got this feeling of dread, like something was wrong. Well, he said all night long, he could hear stuff yelling at him from outside, telling him to open the door. Some of these voices sounded like his family members, friends. And he said all night long, something was harassing him. Well, that freaked him out, but he really needed this job. So he was there for a couple more months. And then he said one night, the worst thing happened. They had a blackout, and the power was completely gone. And he said it was completely dark in this gas station. Now, he'd locked the doors and everything, but he remembered what that old man told him. Do not let it get dark in here. So he scrambles to find this lantern, and he starts trying to get it lit. And he can hear stuff moving around. And he can see shadows of things running around the gas station. And he can hear this laughter. And he can hear banging sounds coming from outside, like something was trying to get in. Finally, he manages to get this lantern on. But all night long, once again, he could see things running around. He could hear voices calling him, telling him to come out of the light. And the next morning, he was so terrified, he quit this job. And he said that was probably the most terrifying job he had ever worked, working night shift at a small gas station outside of the Navajo reservation.
Have you ever heard of the Candy Lady in Texas? Clara Crane was born in 1871 in Terrell, Texas. She married a man named Leonard Gilbert Crane, and everyone knew that he had a drinking problem. Clara and Leonard would have a daughter together named Marcella, and when Marcella was just 5 years old, a terrible accident happened. While out in the field with her father, she had an accident that took her life. Clara was obviously devastated, and it got even worse when she found out that Leonard had been drinking at the time of the accident, so she blamed him for the passing of her daughter. 2 years went by and Clara was still grief-stricken, and finally she decided to take revenge. Caramels were her husband's favorite treat, and so she made a whole bunch of them and then poisoned them and fed them to her husband Leonard. He passed away from the poison candy, and the next day a neighbor would come check on Clara because of her frenzied and shaken state. The neighbor discovered what Clara had done and then called the county sheriff, Fred Springer. Clara got kind of aggressive with Mr. Springer, and so she was taken into custody and eventually put on trial for first-degree murder. Clara was found guilty, but instead of being taken to prison, she was taken to the North Texas Lunatic Asylum or the Terrell State Hospital. In 1899, Clara was released from the hospital due to overcrowding, and it wouldn't be until 1903 that our legend starts. According to the legend, as soon as Clara was released from the hospital, she immediately went back to her house and stayed out of sight from everyone. But then in 1903, local children started finding candy on their windowsills. Many of these children went missing, like simply vanished into thin air, and when the candy was found, it was often signed by the Candy Lady. Many children claimed to find candy on their windowsills, and all of it was signed by the Candy Lady, but it wasn't just the children that were going missing. The sheriff also went missing, and he was found in a ditch with forks stabbed into his eyes. A farmer also found teeth, rotting teeth in his field, and they were small teeth as if belonging to children. So what are your thoughts on it? Do you think that the Candy Lady is real, or is it all just an urban legend? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and follow for more spooky things.
I need to tell you this ghost story. This story was sent in to my email, and I'm going to tag the sender in the description below. If you ever have any ghost story, paranormal experience, or scary story that you'd like to share, you can send it to my email in my bio. This was a time where my grandparents were staying at my dad's because he was out of town, and my grandpa was walking with a cane because of a lump from a stroke he previously had. It was 1 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, and I was just getting home from school when I walked in and saw my grandpa in the hallway. He was walking towards his room, and I tapped his shoulders and said, "Hey Grandpa, I'm home." And as I was just about to go into my room, through the corner of my eye, I saw him quickly go to his room and slam the door. I immediately went to check because my grandpa couldn't walk fast, and we don't slam doors. I went into the room, and it was empty. I looked in the closet. No one was there. I ran to my room and closed the door and grabbed my dog when I heard a male voice say, "Come here now." And then it said it again, but more demonic and distorted. I yelled no, and for it to leave me alone, and my bedroom door was shaking like someone was banging on it, and I heard all the closet doors open and slam close in the room that was right next to mine. After it stopped, I ran with my dog, and after I got outside, I called my grandma. She said, "Hey, I'm at Sam's with your grandpa." "Do you want anything?" I told her the story, and she says, "Always yell and tell it to leave you alone after." She called a priest to bless the house and to bless me. When I was about 10 and my sister was 6, we would stay at my grandma's, and this has happened multiple times. The same thing. Me and my sister were asleep, and at around 2:30 in the morning, I heard what sounded like a marble dropping at the foot of our bed. Over and over again, I would hear this marble. As it got closer to my side of the bed, I woke up my sister, and I said, "Do you hear that?" She said yes, and we ran to my grandparents' room. We would then hear the marble dropping outside their door. Until around 5, we would hear it dropping repeatedly, over and over again. And my grandma's floors were wood, so it was very loud. When I was 6, there was a rumor that my aunt was a witch, a lechuza. For those of you that don't know, in a lot of Latino folklore, a lechuza is a witch disguised as an owl. One night, we went over, and her and my mom were arguing, and my aunt points at me in the back seat of the car, and after that, my nose started to bleed for hours, to the point that I had to go to the hospital to get blood. That's how much I was bleeding. After that, we had no communication with my aunt. The sender says that she also had an experience at a nursing home that she used to work at, and she caught a ghost on video, so I'll put that in here now.
This church pastor killed one of his 2 wives right after she gave birth to his baby.
Whenever someone is backstabbing me, lying about me, gossiping about me, trying to tear me down or whatever, you know what I want to do? My feelings say, choke the life out of them.
Marie Carlson was born in the Philippines, but was raised by her father in America. Marie had big dreams of working for the FBI one day, and while she was studying criminal justice, she met Jeff Carlson and they started dating. They got married together. They had a daughter they named Paris that they were absolutely in love with. But sadly, like so many other people, Marie really struggled with her mental health. This was something that really affected Marie on and off throughout her entire life. And in adulthood, after she gave birth to her daughter Paris, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Eventually, Marie and her husband decided to get a divorce, but they did end things on good terms for their daughter's sake. And after a lot of back and forth mentally, Marie agreed that primary custody of her daughter should go to her ex-husband. This was a very difficult decision. She did not think that she was in a very stable place in life, and she thought that she should do what's best for her daughter versus what she wanted more. Marie moved to Florida, and she started working at a coffee shop that was inside of a church, the Calvary Emerald Coast Church, that was run by its pastor, James Flanders. James Flanders was a very well-loved pastor. He was very charismatic, and he had a more casual way of doing his preachings. James's wife Tanya was also really involved in the church, and they were just seen as this happy power golden couple in their church. And Marie quickly became very close with the Flanders. They helped her out a lot at first by paying her bills, but by October of 2009, Marie was living with them. And by 2010, Marie was pregnant. Now, Marie, James, and Tanya told very different stories about how Marie came to be pregnant. One was that Marie became pregnant by an abusive ex-boyfriend. She did not want to keep the baby, so James and Tanya were planning on adopting Marie's baby. Another was that Marie agreed to be a surrogate for James and Tanya, but Tanya actually told some of her closest friends that Marie was their surrogate, but they couldn't afford to do the more traditional way of surrogacy. So James and Marie conceived this baby the old-fashioned way. But every single story they told ended the same way, that Marie was planning on giving her baby to James and Tanya after she was born. They even threw Maria/Tanya a baby shower. There's this photo of Marie, who's very pregnant, next to Tanya, and she has like a pillow under her shirt to pose for this like cute photo together. So they all seem really happy. Everything seemed like it was really good. But shortly after Marie gave birth to a little girl named Grace, Marie disappeared. She sent out a text to all of her friends and family on October 19th, 2011 that read that she was leaving Florida and there was something that she always wanted to do that she was going to do, but the text was very vague and it didn't say what she was doing or where she was going. And everyone that like really knew Marie got a really bad feeling after getting this text. It didn't sound like her. Like, she wasn't the type to just get up and leave, especially without telling her first daughter, Paris, where she would be going. And also, like, the words that were in the text just did not sound like Marie. There was just a gut feeling felt by all of Marie's loved ones that she wasn't actually the one that sent this text. So 5 days later, she was reported missing. And the police actually took Marie's disappearance very seriously right away, which is something that I feel like I never ever get to say in these cases. And investigators were really interested in learning more about and speaking with James and Tanya Flanders. They were the last to see Marie. She lived with them, and they were also raising Marie's newborn daughter. James told the investigators that they were helping Marie out, like they were paying her bills and also letting her live with them. And in exchange, Marie wanted to help them start a family and have a baby. So she agreed to be their surrogate, but like IVF, the more traditional route, was way too expensive. So James and Marie conceived this baby by sleeping together. And of course, this had to be a secret because James was a pastor and it didn't look good if he was sleeping with someone that wasn't his wife, Tanya. But he also did say that Tanya knew about this, was completely okay with this, and she was actually in the room while Marie and James conceived this baby. It really sounds like the Handmaid's Tale. But when Tanya was questioned, she actually let it slip, a really big secret that no one knew. Marie wasn't actually their surrogate. She was her sister wife. They were in like a throuple polygamous style marriage where James got Tanya and James also got Marie. This is how Marie and James actually conceived this baby, but Marie wasn't ready to have another child, so she agreed to let James and Tanya raise her baby. And this was something that Marie was happy to do, according to Tanya, but of course it had to be a big secret because James was a pastor. But then investigators started hearing whispers, rumors throughout their church. One witness overheard Marie saying that she wanted the baby and James all to herself without Tanya. So a theory and possible motive began to emerge that Marie and James got pregnant. Marie agreed to give over her daughter Grace once the baby was born, but then when the baby was born, Marie changed her mind and James and Tanya killed her to keep custody of the baby. Cell phone records proved that James and Marie's cell phones were together for days after James said he last saw Marie. Detectives reached out to James and Tanya again, said that they wanted to speak with them, but after hearing this, James and Tanya actually packed up their house and fled in the middle of the night and moved away from Florida all the way across the entire country to Arizona. And after they left Florida, more members of their church started coming out saying some really crazy stuff. Like James was telling them that he had to leave the country because of something really bad. James also allegedly sat down all the other high-ranking members of his church and told them that he was in a polygamous marriage with Tanya and Marie. He resigned as a pastor that day, and just a few days later, they packed up and moved to Arizona. James and Tanya certainly looked very suspicious, but there wasn't actually any physical evidence or even a body to make an arrest for murder. And then 6 months after Marie disappeared, an anonymous tip came through saying that James killed Marie and then buried her body in their backyard. Officers went and did a huge search of the Flanders' old backyard. They brought a bunch of cadaver dogs. They had like that ground penetrating sonar. They searched for hours, but they did not find Marie's body. Sadly, years and years would go by without any answers. And then on May 5th, 2015, they finally arrested James for second-degree murder. They were still nervous that they did not have enough evidence to actually get a conviction. So with the blessing from Marie's family, they offered James a plea deal. If he told them where they could find Marie's body, that he would get a reduced sentence. And then in April of 2016, almost 5 years after Marie first went missing, James accepted this plea deal and he pled guilty to manslaughter, which holds a maximum sentence of only 15 years in prison. And that's when they discovered that Marie really was in the backyard the entire time. This is James's story of events on how Marie died. Whether or not you believe it, let me know in the comments. I actually do not believe this story at all. He said on October 17th, him and Marie were having an argument and Marie got really violent with him. So to like stop her from attacking him, he kind of like bear hugged her. He wrapped his arms around her and then they accidentally fell down, and it was like the effects of being like bear hugged and falling that killed Marie. James then dug a hole in his backyard and buried her body. But he actually dug the hole so deep that the cadaver dogs and the sonar could not find her. And this is just so heartbreaking because it took over 5 years to find her body, and they got that tip only 6 months after she disappeared. And they did search the backyard. They actually did, but they didn't find her. And if they had found her, then they would have never had to offer James a plea deal. If they would have found her in that initial search 6 months after she disappeared, then he could have gone away for life. But instead, he will be released after serving 15 years. He could be released as early as 2029, which is only 3 years away. And if you're wondering about James's wife, Tanya, there was never enough evidence to prove that she had any involvement or knowledge about Marie's murder, even though let me know your thoughts about that. And Tanya is actually still raising Marie and James's daughter, Grace. There's so many thoughts and feelings about this case. It's so absolutely frustrating. On one hand, I'm really happy that Marie's loved ones, her daughter, have answers and have closure and we're able to put her to rest. But it's so hard knowing that she was there. They were probably like inches away from her. They could have found her and they didn't. And because of that, now this man could be released from prison in only 3 years, and his wife is raising Marie's baby. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments. But while you're there, please remember that this is Marie's story. You have no idea who could be in the comment section. Marie's daughter, Marie's loved ones, her friends could be in the comment section. You have no idea who could ever be reading your comments. So please always remember to be respectful. While you're in the comments, please also let me know a case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that reached out and suggested this case. And I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.